Somewhere in the galaxy, there is an academy that has killed more students than it has graduated. Every species in the known universe fears it. Warlords send their strongest children there to die with honor. Empires spend billions preparing a single candidate for admission. And in the entire 400-year history of this place, no student has ever laughed on the first day until her. Her name was not supposed to be on that list. Her species was not supposed to be in that building. And she was definitely, absolutely, without question, not supposed to survive orientation. But paperwork is a funny thing. One wrong number. One lazy clerk. One tiny little box checked on the wrong line. And suddenly a 26-year-old human woman from a planet most of the galaxy had never even heard of was standing in the most dangerous hallway ever built, holding a suitcase full of snacks, and wondering why everyone around her looked like they were attending their own funeral. This is her story. And if you think it starts with something heroic, you are wrong. It starts with a sandwich. The Galactic Administrative Processing Center on Station Bellum 9 was not a place anyone visited on purpose. It smelled like recycled air and old carpet. The lights buzzed in a frequency that made your teeth itch. And every single chair in the waiting area was designed for a body shape that did not exist in nature. Maya Chen had been sitting in one of these chairs for 6 hours, and she was fairly certain her spine would never forgive her. She had come to Station Bellum 9 for one simple reason. Her work visa for the Alferi Trade Corridor had expired, and she needed a renewal. She was a cargo logistics coordinator. That was a fancy way of saying she helped alien shipping companies figure out how to pack boxes so nothing broke during faster-than-light travel. It was not glamorous work. It was not exciting work, but it paid well enough and she got to see strange corners of the galaxy. And that was more than most humans could say. Humans had only been part of the galactic community for about 40 years. In cosmic terms, that was nothing. Most species had been spacefaring for thousands of years, some for tens of thousands. Humans were the new kids, and most of the galaxy treated them the way you might treat a puppy that had somehow wandered into a board meeting. Cute, confused, probably harmless. Definitely not supposed to be there. Maya did not mind this reputation. She found it useful. When people expected nothing from you, everything you did was a pleasant surprise. Or at least, that was what she told herself during the long hours on stations like this one. The clerk behind the counter was a Draenei, a species that looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a filing cabinet. They had 6 arms, compound eyes, and an obsessive love of documentation that bordered on religious. The Draenei were the bureaucrats of the galaxy. They ran every administrative center, processed every form, and maintained every record. They were very good at their jobs. They were also, on rare occasions, very bad at their jobs. And today was one of those rare occasions. The clerk's name was Viketh, and Viketh was having what the Draenei called a cascade failure morning. This meant that one small mistake early in the day had created a chain reaction of errors that was now spreading through every file Viketh touched. It had started when Viketh accidentally spilled nutrient paste on the haptic interface of the processing terminal. The paste had caused the terminal to register a series of phantom inputs. These phantom inputs had scrambled the categorization codes for the next 300 applications in the queue, and one of those applications belonged to Maya Chen. Maya's visa renewal form, application reference number GVV 7781 THTHTHTH2, had been recategorized. It was no longer a Class 3 work visa renewal. It was now a Class 9 priority enrollment confirmation for something called the Vorfane Military Excellence Academy. Viketh did not notice this. Viketh was too busy trying to clean nutrient paste out of the terminal with a piece of cloth that was only making things worse. When Maya's number was finally called, she walked to the counter with her documents and her patience worn thin. She handed over her identification chip. Viketh scanned it without looking. The terminal beeped. A new identification card was printed. Viketh handed it to Maya, along with a sealed data packet, and said the words that would change her life forever. Congratulations on your enrollment. Transport to the Academy departs from Dock 17 in 90 minutes. Do not be late. They do not wait. Maya blinked. I am sorry. What? Dock 17, 90 minutes. Next. No, wait. I am here for a visa renewal. A work visa. For the trade corridor. Viketh looked at the terminal. The terminal showed a Class 9 priority enrollment confirmation. Viketh looked back at Maya. The system shows enrollment confirmation. Your species applied through the Frontier Integration Program. It has been approved. Congratulations. Maya had never heard of the Frontier Integration Program. She had never heard of the Vorthane Military Excellence Academy. She had certainly never applied to either, but she had spent 6 hours in that waiting room, and she had dealt with enough galactic bureaucracy to know one universal truth. Arguing with a Draenei clerk was like arguing with a wall, except the wall had 6 arms and access to your permanent record. "Can I speak to a supervisor?" Maya asked. "Supervisor is on nutritional break. Will return in 4 standard hours." 4 hours. The transport to wherever this academy was would leave in 90 minutes. Maya looked at the identification card in her hand. It was shiny and official looking. It had her name on it. It had a holographic seal she did not recognize. And at the bottom, in small text, it read, "Vorthane Military Excellence Academy, Enrolled Cadet, Active Status." Maya looked at Vikith. Vikith was already calling the next number. She stepped away from the counter and opened the sealed data packet on her personal device. Inside was a dense block of text in formal galactic standard. She skimmed it. Words jumped out at her. Elite training program. Survival certification. Combat readiness evaluation. Interspecies tactical integration. Live weapons qualification. Maya read that part again. Then she read the part below it. Mortality disclaimer. Acceptable casualty threshold. Emergency next of kin notification protocol. She stood very still in the middle of the processing center. Around her, aliens of every shape and size shuffled through the bureaucratic maze. Nobody paid attention to her. She was just another small, soft, unremarkable human in a galaxy full of beings with claws and armor and natural venom. The smart thing to do would be to wait 4 hours for the supervisor. Explain the mistake. Get it corrected. Go back to her shipping logistics job. Go back to her normal, safe, boring life. Maya thought about this for approximately 15 seconds. Then she thought about her apartment on the trade station. The tiny room with the window that looked out at a cargo bay. The job that paid well, but made her feel like she was slowly turning into furniture. The same routine every single day. Wake up, pack boxes, eat dinner alone, sleep, repeat. She was 26 years old, and she had already started counting the days until retirement. She looked at the identification card again. Vorthane Military Excellence Academy. She had no idea what it was. She had no idea where it was. She had absolutely no business being enrolled there. And a small, reckless voice in the back of her head whispered something that had gotten humans into trouble since the beginning of their history. What is the worst that could happen? Maya Chen picked up her suitcase, the one she had packed for a 2-day visa renewal trip, which contained mostly snacks, a change of clothes, and a paperback novel. She walked to Dock 17. She boarded the transport, and she did not look back. The transport was not what she expected. It was a military vessel. Sleek, angular, and painted in colors that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The interior was sparse and cold. There were no windows. The seats were arranged in rows, and each seat was built to accommodate species much larger than a human. Maya felt like a child sitting in an adult's chair. Her feet did not touch the floor. She was not alone. There were others on the transport, about 40 of them, and every single one of them looked like they had been designed by nature specifically for the purpose of killing things. In the row across from her sat a Cravathi. The Cravathi were enormous, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in dense, dark scales, with 4 arms that ended in hands capable of crushing stone. This particular Cravathi was sitting perfectly still, eyes closed, breathing in a slow rhythm that suggested deep meditation or barely controlled rage. Maya was not sure which. Behind the Cravathi was a pair of Seleni. The Seleni were slender and pale, with elongated skulls and eyes that glowed faintly blue in the dim light. They had a reputation for being some of the most dangerous close combat fighters in the galaxy. Their bones were reinforced with natural carbon fiber, and they could move faster than most species could track with their eyes. In the back of the transport, taking up an entire row by themselves, were 3 Voruk. The Voruk were insectoid, armored, and communicated primarily through clicks and vibrations. Each of them had a natural exoskeleton that could withstand small arms fire. They looked at Maya with their many eyes and then looked away, apparently deciding she was not worth their attention. Every single being on this transport had trained for years to reach this moment. Some of them had trained since birth. The Vorthane Academy was the most prestigious and the most lethal military training institution in the galaxy. Admission was not given lightly. It was earned through blood and proof and sacrifice. And then there was Maya, sitting in her oversized seat, eating a granola bar from her suitcase, reading her paperback novel, looking for all the world like she had accidentally boarded the wrong bus and had decided to just ride it out. The Cravathi across from her opened one eye. It stared at her. Then it spoke, its voice deep enough to vibrate the floor panels. "You, small one. What species are you?" Maya looked up from her book. "Human," she said. The Cravathi's eye narrowed. "I do not know this species." "Most people do not," Maya said. She held up her granola bar. "Do you want some? It is oat and chocolate chip." The Cravathi stared at the granola bar for a long time. Then it closed its eye and went back to meditating or being angry or whatever it was doing. Maya shrugged and went back to her book. The transport ride took 7 hours. During that time, nobody spoke, nobody ate, nobody moved. It was, Maya decided, the most uncomfortable and boring 7 hours of her life. She finished her novel. She ate 3 more granola bars. She tried to sleep, but the seat was too large and too hard. She ended up folding her jacket into a pillow and curling up like a cat in the corner of the seat. When the transport finally docked, a tone sounded through the cabin, and a voice announced in Galactic Standard that they had arrived at Vorthane Station. The other cadets stood in unison. Maya scrambled to untangle herself from her improvised sleeping position and nearly fell out of the seat. She grabbed her suitcase and followed the others down the ramp and into the station. And that was when the reality of what she had done began to settle over her like a cold fog. Vorthane Station was built into an asteroid. The walls were raw stone, reinforced with metal beams and lit by harsh white lights that left no shadows. The air was cold and tasted like iron. The gravity was slightly higher than standard, which meant Maya felt heavier, like someone had draped an invisible blanket of lead over her shoulders. They were herded into a large hall. The floor was stone. The ceiling was high. And standing at the far end, on a raised platform, was the single most intimidating being Maya had ever seen. It was a Dreythari. The Dreythari were rare. Most people in the galaxy had never seen one in person. They were tall, over 2.5 meters, with skin the color of volcanic ash and eyes that burned a deep molten orange. They had no hair, no visible ears. Their faces were angular and sharp, as if carved from rock by someone who did not believe in soft edges. The Dreythari were the founders of the Vorthane Academy, and they ran it with a philosophy that could be summarized in one sentence: the universe does not forgive weakness. This particular Dreythari was Commandant Solvrek, and he was looking at the new cadets the way a butcher looks at livestock. "You are here," he said. His voice filled the hall without effort. "That means you have been judged worthy of the chance to prove yourselves. Not worthy of graduation, not worthy of survival, worthy of the chance, nothing more." He paused. His molten eyes swept across the crowd. Maya felt them pass over her like a searchlight. "In the next 12 months, you will be tested in ways your bodies and minds were not designed to endure. You will learn combat. You will learn tactics. You will learn survival in environments that will try to kill you every second of every day. Some of you will fail. Some of you will quit, and some of you will die." He said the word die the same way someone else might say lunch, casually. Inevitably, the average graduation rate of this academy is 11%. Maya did the math in her head. There were about 40 cadets in this group. 11% of 40 was 4.4. Roughly 4 of them would make it. 36 would not. She should have been terrified. She should have been rethinking every decision that had led her to this moment. She should have been looking for the exit, planning her escape, demanding to speak to someone about the clerical error that had brought her here. Instead, Maya Chen did something that no cadet had ever done on the first day of orientation at the Vorthane Military Excellence Academy. She raised her hand. Commandant Solvrek stopped. His molten eyes locked onto her. The entire hall went silent. 40 of the most dangerous young beings in the galaxy turned to look at the small, soft, snack-eating human in the back row, who had just interrupted the most feared military instructor alive. "Yes," Solvrek said. The word was like a knife being unsheathed. "Is there a cafeteria?" Maya asked. I ran out of granola bars on the transport, and I am really hungry. Nobody breathed. The silence in that hall was so complete that Maya could hear her own heartbeat. Then, somewhere in the back, one of the Seleni made a sound. It was small and choked, like they were trying very hard not to do something their body wanted to do. Later, Maya would learn that this was the Seleni equivalent of nervous laughter. Commandant Solvrek stared at her. His expression did not change. His eyes did not blink. He stood there like a statue carved from dark stone, and he looked at this tiny human woman who had just asked about food in the middle of his speech about death. "Cafeteria is through the east corridor," he said finally. "Meals are served at designated times. You will not be late." "Thank you," Maya said brightly. Solvrek continued his speech, but something had shifted in the room. The other cadets kept glancing at Maya, some with confusion, some with disgust, some with something that might have been curiosity. And one of them, a tall Kravathi who had been sitting across from her on the transport, looked at her with something that might have been the very beginning of respect. Not because she was brave, not because she was strong, but because she had done something none of them would have dared to do. She had treated the most terrifying place in the galaxy like it was just another Tuesday, and that, in its own strange way, was the most terrifying thing of all. The first night at Vorthane Academy was not designed for sleeping. It was designed for breaking. Every new cadet was assigned a cell, not a room, not quarters, a cell. The walls were bare stone. The floor was bare stone. There was a thin platform that served as a bed, a small basin for water, and nothing else. No blankets, no pillow, no light switch. The temperature was kept at a level that was uncomfortable for every species in the galaxy, which meant it was too cold for some and too warm for others, and just right for absolutely nobody. Maya walked into her cell, set down her suitcase, and immediately opened it. She pulled out the jacket she had used as a pillow on the transport, folded it into a cushion, and placed it on the stone platform. Then she pulled out a bag of dried fruit, sat down, and started eating. In the cell next to hers, she could hear something large shifting its weight. Through the thin wall, a deep voice rumbled. "Human."
"You make too much noise."
"Sorry," Maya called back. "The dried mango is really crunchy. Do you want some?" There was a long pause. "I do not eat fruit. Your loss. It is really good mango." The voice did not respond. Maya finished her snack, lay down on the stone platform with her jacket under her head, and fell asleep within minutes. This was something she had learned early in her career as a cargo logistics coordinator. When you spent years sleeping on transport ships with recycled air and engine vibrations and crew members who snored in 17 different alien languages, you learned to sleep anywhere. Discomfort was just a setting, and Maya had long ago turned it down to background noise. She did not know that in the cells around her, 40 of the galaxy's most elite warrior candidates lay awake. Some were running combat scenarios in their heads. Some were meditating on the battles to come. Some were dealing with the crushing weight of expectation that had been placed on their shoulders since birth. And all of them, without exception, were wondering about the strange little creature who had asked about the cafeteria and was now sleeping like a baby on what might as well have been a slab of concrete. Morning at the academy was announced by a sound, not a bell, not an alarm. It was a frequency, a deep, bone-shaking vibration that rattled through the stone walls and the floor and the air itself. It was designed to trigger the fight-or-flight response in every known species. It was designed to jolt cadets from sleep into a state of maximum alertness. It was, by all accounts, deeply unpleasant. Maya woke up, blinked, and muttered something about how it sounded like the bass speaker in her college roommate's car. Then she got dressed, packed her remaining snacks into her pockets, and stepped into the corridor. The corridor was already full. Cadets were moving toward the assembly hall in silence, their faces set in expressions of grim determination. Maya fell into step behind a group of Seleni who moved so smoothly they seemed to float. She tried to match their pace and immediately stumbled on the uneven stone floor. One of the Seleni glanced back at her. Its glowing blue eyes held no expression. "You should watch your footing," it said. "The floor is uneven by design. It tests spatial awareness." Or it was just built by someone who did not own a level, Maya said. The Seleni stared at her for a moment, then it turned back around and continued walking. Maya was fairly certain she had just made a joke that did not translate well across species. This was going to be a recurring problem. The assembly hall was the same one from the night before. Commandant Solvrek stood on his platform, looking exactly the same as he had 12 hours ago. Maya was not entirely convinced he had moved at all. "Today begins your evaluation," Solvrek announced. "You will be assessed on physical capability, tactical thinking, pain tolerance, and adaptive response. These evaluations will determine your training groups. Those who score lowest in all categories will be given one chance to improve. If they fail to improve, they will be removed from the program." Maya raised her hand again. Several cadets near her visibly flinched. Solvrek's molten eyes found her. "Yes, the human. When you say removed, do you mean sent home or removed in a more permanent way?" "That depends on the circumstances of the failure," Solvrek said. "That is not super reassuring," Maya said. "It is not meant to be." The first evaluation was physical. They were taken to a massive chamber that had been carved out of the asteroid's interior. It was easily the size of several sports fields. The floor was covered in obstacles. Walls to climb, gaps to jump, beams to balance on, tunnels to crawl through. And all of it was set at a difficulty level calibrated for species that had claws, extra limbs, natural armor, or some combination of all three. Maya stood at the starting line and looked at the course. The first obstacle was a vertical wall approximately 4 meters high. The surface was smooth stone with small handholds carved into it. For a gravity with 4 arms and grip strength that could bend metal, this was a warm-up exercise. For a Selene with their supernatural agility, it was barely a challenge. For a human woman who had not done a pull-up since high school gym class, it was a problem. The cadets were sent through one at a time. Maya watched the Kravathi from the transport go first. Its name, she had learned, was Torath. It went up the wall like it was walking on flat ground. Its 4 arms moved in a fluid rhythm, and it cleared the top in seconds. The rest of the course was similar. Torath powered through every obstacle with raw, overwhelming strength. Its time was recorded. The evaluators, a team of Drathari with data pads, made notes. The Selene were next. They were faster than Torath, but in a different way. Where Torath had used brute force, the Selene used precision and speed. They flowed through the obstacles like water, their movements so efficient that they made the impossible look easy. Then came the Voruk. The insectoid cadets used their exoskeletons to tank through obstacles that would have hurt others. They did not go around things. They went through them. One of them actually cracked the stone of a wall segment by hitting it too hard. The evaluators made more notes. Then it was Maya's turn. She stood at the starting line. The evaluators looked at her. She looked at the course. She took a deep breath. She could not climb the wall the way the others had. Her arms were not strong enough. Her fingers were not long enough. Her body was not built for it. But Maya had spent 3 years working in cargo bays across the galaxy, and cargo bays were full of things that needed to be climbed, crawled through, and navigated around. She had not trained for combat, but she had trained, in her own accidental way, for exactly this kind of improvised physical problem-solving. She approached the wall. Instead of going straight up the way the others had, she looked at it. She studied the handholds. She mapped a route in her head. Then she did something none of the other cadets had done. She used momentum. She took a running start, kicked off the wall to gain height, caught a handhold with both hands and used her legs to push off the surface in a series of quick, scrambling movements that were not graceful but were effective. She got to the top in about 3 times the time it took Torath, breathing hard and sweating. But she got there. The evaluators made notes. One of them tilted its head slightly, which Maya would later learn was the Drathari equivalent of raising an eyebrow. The rest of the course was a similar story. Maya could not overpower any obstacle. She could not outspeed any obstacle. But she could look at every single one of them and find a way through that the course designers had not anticipated. When she reached a gap too wide to jump, she lowered herself down, traversed along the edge, and climbed up on the other side. When she reached a beam too narrow for her feet, she sat down and scooted across it. When she reached a tunnel too small for her to crawl through normally, she turned sideways and wormed her way through. Her time was the worst of all the cadets. Not by a small margin, by a massive, embarrassing margin. The evaluators recorded it. Several cadets who had been watching made sounds that, in their various species, meant something close to pity. But one evaluator made a different kind of note, not about her time, about her approach. The note read, in Drathari script, subject completed all obstacles. No assistance, no bypasses. Unconventional methods throughout. Further observation recommended. The second evaluation was tactical. Cadets were placed in a simulation chamber and given a scenario. An enemy force was approaching a position. They had limited resources. They had to develop a strategy to defend the position for a set period of time. Most cadets approached this with military precision. They analyzed force compositions. They calculated engagement ranges. They set up defensive perimeters based on doctrines they had studied since childhood. The Kravathi favored aggressive defense, meeting the enemy head-on with overwhelming force. The Seleni preferred ambush tactics, using speed and stealth to pick off enemies before they could engage. The Vorok built fortifications and held ground through sheer endurance. Maya was given the same scenario. She sat in the simulation chamber, looked at the tactical display, and thought about it for a while. Then she did something unusual. She asked the simulation a question. Can I talk to the enemy force? The simulation was not designed for this. There was a long pause while the system processed the request. The evaluators outside the chamber exchanged glances. Clarify, the simulation said. The enemy force. Can I communicate with them? Open a channel. Send a message. Something like that. Another pause. Communication channel available. She sent a message to the simulated enemy force. The message was simple. She told them that the position they were approaching was heavily mined and that she had rigged the entire area to explode if anyone got within 500 meters. She told them this was not a bluff. She told them she was very bad at fighting but very good at making things blow up. She told them they were welcome to test this if they wanted, but she recommended they did not. The simulated enemy force was an AI. It was programmed to assess threats and respond accordingly. It analyzed Maya's message. It cross-referenced the tactical data available. And because Maya had, during her preparation time, actually used her limited resources to set up a pattern on the ground that looked like a minefield from a distance, even though it was really just rocks arranged in a grid, the AI determined that the threat was credible. The enemy force withdrew. Maya defended the position for the entire evaluation period without firing a single shot. The evaluators sat in silence for a very long time after that. The third evaluation was pain tolerance. This was the one that worried Maya the most because she had a fairly normal human relationship with pain, which was that she did not enjoy it and would prefer to avoid it. The test was straightforward. Cadets were subjected to increasing levels of a neural stimulation that triggered pain responses. They were told to endure as long as they could. Their threshold was recorded. The Kravathi excelled at this. Their nervous systems were built to filter pain. Toroth sat through levels that would have hospitalized most species and barely blinked. The Vorok were similar. Their exoskeletons dampened pain signals naturally. Even the Seleni, who appeared fragile, had a meditation technique that allowed them to separate their consciousness from physical sensation. Maya sat down in the evaluation chair. The neural stimulator was placed on her arm. The evaluator explained the procedure in a flat, clinical tone. The stimulation would begin at a low level and increase in increments. She was to raise her hand when she wanted to stop. The stimulation began. Level 1 was a tingling. Level 2 was a sting. Level 3 was a deep throbbing ache. Level 4 was genuine pain, the kind that made her jaw clench and her eyes water. Level 5 was worse. Level 6 was significantly worse. By level 7, Maya was gripping the armrests of the chair hard enough to turn her knuckles white. She did not raise her hand. Level 8. She was breathing through her teeth. She could feel sweat running down her back. Every nerve in her arm was screaming. She did not raise her hand. Level 9. The pain was a living thing now. It crawled through her body like fire. She could feel her muscles trying to spasm, trying to pull away from the source. Her vision was going blurry at the edges. She did not raise her hand. She made it to level 10 before she finally stopped. Her time at the highest levels was short compared to the Kravathi or the Vorok, but her total endurance, the total amount of pain she absorbed before quitting, was higher than anyone expected. The evaluator looked at the data, then looked at Maya, then looked at the data again. Your species has no natural pain dampening mechanism, the evaluator said. Nope, Maya said. She was shaking slightly and her face was pale. but she managed a small smile. "We just do it the old-fashioned way." "Which way is that?" "Stubbornness." The evaluator made a note. The note was longer than usual. The final evaluation of the day was adaptive response. Cadets were placed in a room and presented with unexpected situations. A sudden loud noise, a flash of light, a floor panel giving way, a wall moving. The purpose was to measure how quickly a cadet could assess and respond to an unexpected change in their environment. Most species had evolved specific responses to unexpected stimuli. The Cravathi became aggressive. They would turn toward the threat, raise their arms, and prepare to fight. The Seleni became evasive. They would move away from the stimulus at high speed, putting distance between themselves and the unknown. The Vorit became defensive. They would draw in their limbs, lower their center of gravity, and let their exoskeletons absorb whatever was coming. These were all effective responses. They were predictable, reliable, and fast. The evaluators expected to see some variation of fight, flight, or fortress from every cadet. Maya entered the room. The first stimulus was a loud bang from behind her. She flinched, spun around, saw nothing threatening, and said a word in her native language that the translation system chose not to translate. Then she laughed. The second stimulus was a flash of bright light. She threw up a hand to shield her eyes, squinted, and when the light faded, she looked around the room carefully before relaxing. The third stimulus was the floor dropping out from under her right foot. She stumbled, caught herself on the wall, looked down at the hole, and then looked at the evaluator's observation window with an expression that clearly communicated, "Are you serious right now?" The fourth stimulus was a wall panel sliding toward her quickly. She dodged sideways, tripped, rolled, came up on her feet, and then picked up a piece of loose stone from the floor and held it in her hand like a weapon. The evaluators reviewed her responses. They were messy. They were graceless. They were slow by the standards of every other species in the room, but they were also something else. Something the evaluators had rarely seen. They were unpredictable. Every other cadet in the evaluation had responded to each stimulus in a way that was consistent with their species' hardwired responses. Fight, flight, fortress. These responses were fast, but they were also predictable. If you knew what species you were fighting, you knew how they would react. This was a fundamental principle of interspecies combat strategy. Maya had not followed any pattern. She had flinched, then laughed. She had shielded, then assessed. She had stumbled, then stabilized. She had dodged, then armed herself. Each response was different. Each response was adapted to the specific situation, and none of them matched any known species profile. The head evaluator, a Drathari named Ilvor, sat back in her chair and looked at the data from all 4 evaluations. Physical capability, lowest in the class. Tactical thinking, unconventional but effective. Pain tolerance, unexpectedly high. Adaptive response, unpredictable and varied. Ilvor had been evaluating cadets at Vorthane for 60 years. She had seen prodigies and she had seen failures. She had seen cadets who were physically perfect but mentally fragile. She had seen cadets who were brilliant strategists but collapsed under physical stress. She had seen every combination of strengths and weaknesses that the galaxy had to offer. She had never seen anything like Maya Chen. Ilvor wrote her assessment. It was brief, which was unusual for her. It read, "The human presents no exceptional capability in any individual category. However, she presents an unusual combination of moderate capabilities across all categories, combined with an adaptive flexibility that does not conform to any known species behavioral model. She is by every standard metric the weakest cadet in this class. She is also, potentially, the most interesting. Recommend continued evaluation." Assigned to Group 7. Group 7 was the mixed species training group. It was where the academy put cadets who did not fit neatly into any category. It was sometimes called the leftover group. It was sometimes called worse things. Maya received her group assignment that evening. She was eating dinner in the cafeteria, which she had discovered served food that was technically nutritious and technically edible, but was clearly not designed with the concept of flavor in mind. She was trying to make the grey protein block on her tray taste better by eating it with the last of her dried mango. A message appeared on the small screen embedded in her tray table. Group 7. Training Block C. Report at 0600. She looked around the cafeteria. At a nearby table, Torath the Cravathi sat alone, eating what appeared to be an entire raw animal of some kind. At another table, the Seleni sat together, eating nothing. Apparently, they only consume nutrients at specific intervals. The Voruk were at their own table, making clicking sounds and vibrating in a way that might have been conversation or might have been digestion. Nobody sat with Maya. Nobody spoke to her. She was an anomaly in a place that did not know what to do with anomalies. She finished her dinner, including the grey protein block, which she decided tasted like cardboard that had been disappointed in life. Then she went back to her cell, lay down on her stone platform with her jacket pillow, and fell asleep. Tomorrow, real training would begin, and Maya Chen, accidental cadet, bureaucratic error, and owner of the worst physical evaluation scores in academy history, slept soundly. Because deep down, in a place she did not yet fully understand, something had shifted. Something had woken up. For the first time in years, she was not counting the days until retirement. She was not thinking about cargo manifests or shipping routes or the small grey window in her small grey apartment. She was thinking about tomorrow. She was looking forward to it. And that feeling, that spark of something alive and electric in her chest, was worth more than any evaluation score the Academy could give her. She just did not know it yet. Group 7 met for the first time in Training Block C at exactly 0600. Training Block C was located deep inside the asteroid, 3 levels below the main corridors, in a section of the Academy that felt like it had been carved out as an afterthought. The walls were rougher here. The lights were dimmer. The air was colder. If the main academy was a precision instrument, Training Block C was the back of the drawer where you kept things you were not sure what to do with. There were 7 of them, 7 cadets from 7 different species, none of whom had scored well enough in the evaluations to be placed in the elite training groups, but all of whom had shown something just unusual enough that the academy had not yet decided to send them home. Maya was the first to arrive. She sat on the stone floor because there were no chairs, pulled a ration bar from her pocket — she had started hoarding them from the cafeteria — and waited. The second to arrive was a Yanari named Kess. The Yanari were a species Maya had not encountered before. They were roughly human-sized, covered in short silver fur, with wide-set amber eyes and ears that rotated independently like satellite dishes. Kess moved quietly and sat down against the wall opposite Maya without speaking. The silver fur along Kess's spine was standing up slightly, which Maya guessed meant nervousness. Third was Drin, a Pelori. The Pelori were aquatic in origin, with smooth blue-grey skin, webbed fingers and gills along the sides of their neck that fluttered when they breathed. Drin was clearly uncomfortable in the dry air of the asteroid and kept touching the gills with a slow, anxious rhythm. The Pelori were not known as warriors. They were known as engineers and scientists. Drin being here was almost as unusual as Maya being here. Fourth was Varek, a Thosian. The Thosians were heavy-set, low to the ground, with thick limbs and dense muscle. They had no neck to speak of. Their heads sat directly on their shoulders, giving them a permanently hunched appearance. Varek looked like someone had compressed a much larger being into a smaller space, and the result was all density and no height. Varek sat down and immediately closed its eyes, either sleeping or pretending to. Fifth was Liss, another Selene, but unlike the ones Maya had seen in the main groups, Liss was smaller. The glowing blue eyes were dimmer. One of Liss's arms hung at an odd angle, the result of a bone that had healed improperly. Among the Selene, physical perfection was expected. Liss, with that crooked arm, would have been considered defective. Being assigned to Group 7 was probably better than the alternative, which was being sent home in disgrace. Sixth was Brakthan, a Kravathi, but a young one. Where Torath had been massive and imposing, Brakthan was still growing. Shorter than a full adult by nearly half a meter, with scales that had not yet hardened to their full density. Brakthan sat down and tried to look tough, which was undermined by the fact that a piece of breakfast was stuck to one of the scales on his chin. Seventh was Ori, and Maya had no idea what species Ori was. Uri was small, even smaller than Maya, with a body that seemed to shift and change depending on the light. Sometimes Uri looked solid. Sometimes Yuri looked almost translucent. Yuri had large, dark eyes that took up most of the face and moved with a slow, deliberate grace that made everything around Yuri seem rushed by comparison. Yuri said nothing. Yuri said nothing. Bored. 7 misfits in a stone room at the bottom of an academy designed to produce the galaxy's deadliest warriors. Maya looked at each of them. Not one of them would have been anyone's first pick for anything. Perfect, she thought. This is going to be interesting. Their instructor arrived at exactly 0615. He was late, which was unheard of at the academy. He was a Draythari, like Commandant Solvrek, but where Solvrek was carved from obsidian and radiated authority, this one looked like he had been carved from tired. His name was Instructor Grell, and he walked into Training Block C with the energy of someone who had lost a bet. Group 7, Grell said. He did not say it with enthusiasm. He said it the way someone might say, root canal. You are the lowest ranked cadets in this intake. You are here because the academy has not yet decided what to do with you. My job is to train you until they figure it out. Or until you wash out. Whichever comes first. He looked at them. 7 pairs of eyes plus Uri's large dark ones looked back at him. Any questions? Maya raised her hand. Grell sighed. The human. Of course. What? Is the training going to be the same as the other groups? No. The other groups train for excellence. You train for survival? There is a difference. What is the difference? The other groups are expected to become the best warriors in the galaxy. You are expected to not die. Start there. Maya nodded. She could work with that. Not dying was a goal she had a lot of experience with. The first week of training was physical conditioning, and it nearly broke all of them. Geralt's approach to physical training was simple and brutal. He did not have a sophisticated program. He did not use advanced techniques or specialized equipment. He ran them. He made them carry heavy things. He made them climb. He made them crawl. He made them do it again and again until their bodies screamed and their minds went blank, and the only thing keeping them moving was the knowledge that stopping meant failing. Maya suffered. There was no gentle way to put it. She was the physically weakest member of an already weak group. Her muscles burned. Her joints ached. Her lungs felt like they were being squeezed through a straw. Every morning she woke up feeling like she had been beaten with sticks, and every morning she got up and did it again. But something strange happened during that first week. Something nobody expected, including Maya herself. She did not quit. The Kravati in the elite groups trained harder. The Seleni trained faster. The Voruk trained longer. But Maya trained more consistently. She never had a peak performance. She never had a breakthrough moment. She just showed up every single day and did the work. She did it badly. She did it slowly. She did it with form that would have made any serious trainer weep. But she did it, and she kept doing it. On the third day, Varric the Thosian collapsed during a carry exercise. The weight was too much. Varric lay on the stone floor, chest heaving, eyes squeezed shut, and did not get up. Maya, who was behind Varric and carrying her own load badly, stopped. She set down her weight. She walked over to Varric. She sat down next to the Thosian on the floor. Come on, she said. We go together. Slow is fine. Varric opened one eye. I cannot carry it. Then carry half. I will carry the other half. That is not the exercise. The exercise is to move the weight from here to there. Nobody said we had to do it alone. Varric stared at her. Then something shifted in the Thosian's flat, broad face. It was not a smile. Thosians did not smile the way humans did, but it was something close. They split the weight between them and carried it together, slower than anyone else, finishing last by a wide margin. Grell watched this from across the training floor. He did not comment, but he made a note. On the 5th day, Lister Seleni was struggling with a climbing exercise. The crooked arm made it difficult to maintain grip at certain angles. The other cadets had moved on. Liz hung halfway up the wall, stuck, the bad arm trembling with effort. Maya had already finished the climb in her usual slow, messy, inelegant way. She was at the top, breathing hard. She looked down and saw Liz. She lay flat on the top of the wall, reached down with both hands and held them out. Grab on, she said. Liz looked up. The dim blue eyes flickered. I should do it myself. You should get to the top. How you get there is just details. Liz hesitated, then reached up with the good arm and grabbed Maya's hand. Maya pulled, which was harder than she expected because even a small Seleni was heavier than they looked. Between the two of them, with a lot of grunting and scrambling and a few words the translator refused to process, Liz made it to the top. Geralt watched this too. He made another note. By the end of the first week, something had begun to form in Group 7. It was not friendship, not exactly. It was not camaraderie in the military sense. It was something more basic than that. It was the simple recognition that they were all in the same terrible situation, and that the only way any of them were going to get through it was if they helped each other. And somehow, without anyone planning it or agreeing to it, Maya had become the center of this recognition. She was not the leader. She was not the strongest or the smartest or the fastest, but she was the one who noticed when someone was struggling. She was the one who sat down next to them. She was the one who said, "We go together." And in a place designed to isolate and break individuals, that simple instinct to connect was more powerful than any of them realized. The second week brought combat training, and combat training brought a new kind of problem. The Academy's combat curriculum was built on a simple principle. Every species has natural weapons: claws, teeth, venom, speed, strength, armor. The Academy taught cadets to maximize these natural advantages and to compensate for natural weaknesses. It was effective. It had produced some of the most dangerous fighters in galactic history. Maya had no natural weapons. She had no claws, no fangs, no venom, no armor, no exceptional speed or strength. She had soft skin, blunt nails, flat teeth, and a body that bruised if you looked at it too hard. By every measure the Academy used, she was unarmed. Grell stood in front of Group 7 on the first day of combat training and looked at Maya the way an engineer looks at a component that does not fit anywhere in the design. "The human," he said. "What does your species use for combat?" Maya thought about this. "Tools, mostly. Tools. Weapons. Things we make. Sticks. Rocks. Knives. Guns. We build things to fight with because we are not very good at fighting without them. This phase of training is unarmed combat. Then I am going to have a really bad time." She was right. She had a really bad time. The first sparring exercise paired her with Brakthan, the young Kravathi. Even at his smaller size, Brakthan was still significantly larger and stronger than Maya. The exercise was simple. Score 3 contact points on your opponent. A contact point was a clean touch to a designated target zone on the body. Brakthan scored his 3 contact points in under 10 seconds. Maya scored 0. She spent most of the exercise trying not to get hit, which she was only partially successful at. She ended the exercise with a bruise on her shoulder, a scrape on her knee, and a profound appreciation for the Kravathi's restraint, because Brakthan had clearly been holding back. The second sparring exercise paired her with Kes, the Yanari. This went slightly better, but only because Kes was also not particularly aggressive. The Yanari were scouts and trackers by nature, not fighters. Kes moved well but hesitated before striking, and Maya was able to dodge a few times before eventually getting tagged 3 times. By the end of the first combat session, Maya's score was the worst in the group. She was bruised, sore, and had not landed a single contact point on anyone. She sat on the floor after the session, pressing a cold pack against her shoulder. Drin the Pelori sat next to her, applying moisture gel to the gills on the sides of their neck, which had dried out during the exercise. "You are not built for this," Drin said. It was not unkind. It was an observation. "No," Maya agreed. "I am really not." "Then why do you keep doing it?" Maya thought about this. She looked at the bruise on her shoulder. She thought about the cargo bay on the trade station, the small window, the grey days. She thought about the transport ride, the granola bars, the look on Solvrek's face when she asked about the cafeteria. "Because this is the first time in years I have felt like I am actually doing something," she said. "Even if what I am doing is getting beaten up by aliens." Drin made a sound that was the Pelori equivalent of a laugh. It was wet and bubbly, and it made Maya smile. That night, in her cell, Maya did something she had not done in a long time. She made a plan. She could not win at combat the way the others did. Her body simply was not capable of the speed, strength, or durability required. But she had seen something during the sparring sessions. She had seen patterns. Each species fought the same way, every time. The Kravathi advanced and overwhelmed. The Seleni darted and struck. The Thosians absorbed and countered. The Yanari circled and probed. These patterns were effective. They were also predictable, and Maya, who had spent years figuring out how to pack oddly shaped cargo into spaces it should not fit, was very good at finding patterns and exploiting them. She started watching, not just during combat training, but during everything. She watched how each of her group mates moved, how they reacted, how they thought. She started keeping notes on her personal device. Not formal tactical analysis, just observations. Brackton drops his lower left arm when he lunges forward. Kess turns the right ear towards sounds before the left one, creating a blind spot on the left. Varric takes an extra half-second to change direction because of the dense body mass. She did not tell anyone she was doing this. She did not have a grand strategy. She was just doing what humans had always done when faced with opponents who were bigger, faster, and stronger. She was learning. It started with a test that Grell called the cooperation exercise, though the word exercise was doing a lot of heavy lifting, because what it actually was a survival scenario. Group 7 was transported to a section of the asteroid that had been deliberately left undeveloped. It was a maze of natural tunnels, unstable rock formations, extreme temperature variations, and zero artificial lighting. They were given one objective: navigate from point A to point B within 6 hours. There were no maps. There were no guides. There were hazards throughout the route that could cause serious injury or death. And they had to do it as a group, all 7 of them. If even one member did not reach point B, the entire group failed. They stood at the entrance to the tunnel system. It was dark, not dim, not shadowy, dark. The kind of dark that felt solid, like you could reach out and touch it. Kess's ears rotated forward, picking up sound waves from inside the tunnels. I can hear water ahead. And something else, something moving. The tunnels have fauna, Grell had told them before dropping them off. Nothing that will actively hunt you. Probably was not a reassuring word. Maya looked at her group. 7 misfits standing at the edge of the dark. 7 beings who had been thrown together not because of their strengths, but because of their weaknesses. She thought about the last 3 weeks. She thought about carrying weight with Varric, pulling Liss up the wall, eating bad food together in the cafeteria, sharing ration bars, learning each other's names and quirks and fears. She thought about what Grell had said. You train for survival, not excellence. Survival. And survival, Maya knew, was not a solo sport. Okay, she said. Here is what I am thinking. She was the smallest person in the group. She was the weakest. She had the worst scores in almost every evaluation. And they all looked at her. Kess, your hearing is incredible. You go at the front. You are our ears. You hear anything weird, you tell us immediately. Brackton, you go behind Kess. You are the muscle. Anything physical that needs moving or breaking, that is you. Drin, you stay in the middle. Your eyes adjust to low light better than anyone here. You are our guide for anything visual. Varric, you go behind Drin. Your body can take hits better than most. If something falls or collapses, you shield whoever is closest. Liss, you have the best reflexes even with the arm. You watch our backs. Auri. She looked at Auri. The strange, quiet, shifting being who had barely spoken 3 words in 3 weeks. Ori, I have noticed that you can see heat signatures. Am I right about that? Ori's large, dark eyes blinked slowly. Then Ori nodded. I need you to scan ahead and around us whenever you can. If there is anything alive in those tunnels, you will spot it before anyone else. And you? Drin asked. What will you do? I will worry. I am very good at worrying. And if anyone gets hurt or stuck or needs help, I will be there. I am not fast or strong, but I am stubborn and I have snacks. She held up a handful of ration bars. Nobody laughed, but something shifted in the group. Something that felt like trust. Not the dramatic movie scene kind of trust where everyone puts their hands in the middle and cheers. The real kind. The quiet kind. The kind that forms when people realize that someone sees them, actually sees them, and still says, let us do this together. They entered the tunnels. The first hour was slow and careful. Kess led them through the dark, ears rotating constantly, picking up the sounds of dripping water, shifting rock, and distant echoes. Brackton followed close behind, his forearms occasionally bracing against the tunnel walls when the path narrowed. Drin called out changes in the terrain, slopes and drops and turns, with the quiet precision of someone accustomed to navigating complex environments. Maya walked in the middle of the group and talked. She talked about nothing important. She talked about the cafeteria food and which grade block tasted least terrible. She talked about the novel she had been reading on the transport. She talked about her job back on the trade station and the time she had accidentally shipped 40 crates of live insects to the wrong planet. This might have seemed pointless, It was not. The tunnels were designed to create psychological pressure, the darkness, the silence, the cold, the knowledge that you were deep inside an asteroid with tons of rock above you. These were all calculated to trigger fear responses, isolation, claustrophobia, paranoia. The Academy wanted to see how cadets handled fear in unfamiliar environments. Maya's talking did something simple but effective. It gave everyone a point of focus, a human voice in the dark, casual and steady, talking about accidentally shipping insects. It was absurd, it was mundane, and it was exactly what 6 frightened beings needed to hear to remember that they were not alone. They navigated the tunnels. They encountered obstacles, a flooded section that Drin guided them through, swimming ahead to find the air pockets, a narrow crevice that Liz squeezed through first and scouted the path beyond, a rockfall that Varric braced with the thick shoulders and dense body while the others scrambled past, a creature in the dark that Uri spotted with those heat-sensing eyes and steered them around before it even knew they were there. And through all of it, Bracton cleared the way with those 4 strong arms, and Kess listened with those incredible ears, and Maya walked in the middle with her ration bars and her steady voice, and her absolute refusal to let anyone fall behind. They reached Point B in 4 hours and 37 minutes, all 7 of them, together. When they emerged into the lit corridor at the exit point, they stood blinking in the sudden brightness. Grell was waiting. He looked at them. He looked at his timer. He looked at them again. Group 7, he said, you have completed the cooperation exercise. He paused. You are the first group this intake to complete it with all members. Maya looked at him. What happened to the other groups? The elite groups each lost between 1 and 3 members to injury during the exercise. They completed it, but not intact. The Kravathi powerhouses, the Selene speed demons, the Voric tanks. They had all lost people. Group 7, the leftovers, the misfits, the worst cadets in the academy, had lost nobody. Gruel looked at Maya. His tired eyes were still tired, but there was something else in them now. Something that might have been the beginning of a long overdue realization. Dismissed, he said. Get some rest. Tomorrow we do it again. They walked back to their cells together. Nobody said anything dramatic. Nobody made speeches. Brackthon had the food bar thing stuck on his chin again. Drin was making that wet, bubbly laugh about something Varric said. Kess's ears were doing the relaxed sideways droop that meant content. And Maya walked among them, tired and sore and bruised, and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt like she belonged. Word spread through the academy the way it always does in places where people are under pressure, quietly. Sideways, through glances and whispers and half-heard conversations in corridors, Group 7 completed the cooperation exercise with all members. No other group managed that. The Misfits did something the elite cadets could not. Most of the academy dismissed it. A fluke. The exercise was probably easier for the lower groups. The real test would come later. The Misfits would wash out eventually. Everyone knew that. But some of them did not dismiss it. Some of them paid attention. Torath the Kravathi was one of them. Torath was in Group 1, the elite combat group, and Torath was everything a Kravathi cadet was supposed to be. Massive, disciplined, ruthless in training. Top scores in every physical evaluation. Torath was, by every measure, the most formidable cadet in the entire intake. Torath was also lonely. This was not something Kravathi admitted. Kravathi valued strength above all things. Solitude was considered a form of strength. The ability to stand alone, to need no one, was seen as the highest virtue. Torath had been raised on this philosophy. Torath had lived it every day. But Torath had also been watching the small human since the transport ride. The one who had offered a granola bar. The one who had asked about the cafeteria. The one who had fallen asleep on a stone bed like it was nothing. And now Torath was watching from across the cafeteria as Maya sat with her group, 6 aliens and 1 human eating terrible food and making sounds that could only be laughter. Torath did not join them, but Torath watched. The 4th week at the academy introduced weapons training, and this was where things began to shift from Maya in a way that surprised everyone, including herself. The academy's weapons curriculum covered a wide range of combat tools: energy blades, kinetic pistols, plasma rifles, gravity hammers, neural disruptors. Each weapon was designed for a specific species' physiology. Energy blades for species with fast reflexes. kinetic pistols for species with steady hands and good spatial judgment, plasma rifles for species with high heat tolerance, gravity hammers for species with extreme physical strength. There was no weapon designed for humans because no one had expected a human to be here. Grell stood in front of the weapons rack and looked at Maya. "Pick one," he said. Maya looked at the weapons. They were all too big, too heavy, too complex, or too dangerous for her to use effectively. The energy blade hummed with a frequency that made her fillings ache. The kinetic pistol was designed for a hand with 6 fingers. The plasma rifle weighed more than she did. The gravity hammer was a joke. She looked past the standard weapons rack. In the corner of the armory, there was a secondary rack. This one held tools that were not classified as primary weapons. They were supplementary equipment, utility tools. Things like restraint cables, signal flares, smoke grenades, and a collection of small throwing implements that most species used for target practice warm-ups. Maya picked up one of the throwing implements. It was a small metal disc, about the size of her palm, with a weighted edge. It was designed to be thrown at targets during accuracy drills. Nobody used them as actual weapons. They were too small to cause significant damage to any armored species. "That is a training disc," Grell said. "I know," Maya said. She turned it over in her hand. It was light. It fit perfectly in her grip. She could feel the weight distribution. She had spent 3 years packing and handling objects of every shape and size, developing a feel for how things moved through space, how weight affected trajectory, how spin affected direction. She threw it. Not at the target. At the wall to the left of the target. The disc hit the wall, ricocheted off at an angle, and struck the target from the side. The throw was not powerful. It would not have hurt a Kravathi. It would have bounced off a Voruk's exoskeleton. But it was accurate, and it came from an unexpected direction. Gorell looked at the target, then at Maya, then at the target again. "Do that again," he said. She did it again. Same result. Then she did it from a different angle, bouncing the disc off the floor, then off the ceiling, then off 2 surfaces in sequence. Maya had no idea she could do this. She had never thrown a weapon in her life. But she had spent years in cargo bays, bouncing objects off surfaces to get them into hard-to-reach spaces. She had played ricochet games with fellow workers during slow shifts, seeing who could bounce a rubber ball into the most impossible container. It was a stupid time-killing game. It turned out to be exactly the skill set needed for a type of combat she had not known existed. Grell went to the armory records. He searched through the weapon classification system. After several minutes, he found what he was looking for. A section of the weapons database that had not been accessed in over 100 years. Indirect projection weapons. Subcategory: Ricochet class implements. The Academy had a classification for what Maya was doing. It was just so obscure and so unused that nobody had thought to offer it as an option. Ricochet weapons had been abandoned by most species centuries ago because direct fire weapons were more effective in conventional combat. Why bounce a projectile off a wall when you could just shoot someone in the face? But conventional combat assumed you were fighting an enemy face to face. It assumed you had line of sight. It assumed the enemy knew where you were. If you did not have those things, if you were small and weak and your enemy was paying attention to the big obvious threats, a weapon that could hit from an impossible angle was not useless. It was invisible. Grell authorized Maya to train with the ricochet discs. He gave her a set of 12. Along with a practice area and a set of increasingly complex target arrangements. He did not say anything encouraging. He did not say anything discouraging. He just gave her the tools and walked away. Maya trained. She trained the way she did everything. Slowly, stubbornly, consistently. She threw discs for hours. She learned how different surfaces affected the bounce angle. She learned how spin changed the trajectory after impact. She learned to calculate multi-surface ricochets in her head, seeing the angles and paths the way she had once seen cargo arrangements. By the end of the 4th week, she could hit a target around a corner with 2 bounces. By the end of the 5th week, she could hit a moving target with 3 bounces. It was not flashy. It was not powerful. But it was something no one else in the Academy could do, because no one else had thought to try. While Maya was discovering her strange talent, Group 7 was changing in other ways. Brakthen was growing. Not just physically, though his scales were hardening and his body was filling out. He was growing in confidence. The young Kravathi had arrived at the Academy terrified of being seen as weak. Too young, too small, not enough. In Group 7, there was no such thing as enough. Everyone was not enough. And somehow, that made it okay. Brackton started speaking up during tactical discussions. He started offering ideas. They were not always good ideas, but they were ideas, and the group listened to them. Kes the Yanari was developing a skill that went beyond the remarkable hearing. Kes could read a room, not in the psychic sense, but in the social sense. Kes could walk into a space and within moments know who was tense, who was confident, who was afraid, who was about to make a mistake. It was a scout's instinct, evolved over millennia, and in a group setting it was incredibly valuable. Kes became the one who knew when someone needed a break, when the group was pushing too hard, when tensions were about to boil over. Drin the Pelori was emerging as the group's technical mind. The Pelori's engineering background meant Drin could analyze problems that stumped the others. During tactical exercises, Drin would break down complex scenarios into component parts, identify the critical variables, and present options with a clarity that made complicated things simple. Drin also rigged a small humidifier in the cell from spare parts, which solved the gill drying problem and improved Drin's quality of life dramatically. Varric the Phocian had found a purpose. In a group full of beings who needed protecting, Varric's natural ability to absorb damage became not a limitation, but a gift. Varric positioned during exercises to shield the more vulnerable members of the group, and there was a quiet, fierce pride in this role that transformed the Phocian from a sluggish also ran into something more, something solid and dependable and certain. List the Selene had stopped trying to hide the crooked arm. In Group 7, imperfection was not a source of shame. It was just a fact, like the color of your skin or the number of your limbs. Liss adapted the fighting style around the limitation, developing a one-armed technique that was unorthodox but surprisingly effective. The good arm became faster and more precise to compensate, and the crooked arm became a shield of sorts, angled to deflect rather than strike. And Yuri, quiet, mysterious Uri, who still barely spoke and still shifted between solid and translucent like a living mood ring. Yuri was the group's secret weapon, and they were only beginning to understand why. It happened during a nighttime navigation exercise. The group was moving through a darkened section of the academy, using Kess's hearing and Uri's heat vision to navigate. They came to an intersection, two paths. One led forward, one led to the right. Right, Uri said. It was the most Uri had said in a single exercise. Why right? Maya asked. Yuri's large dark eyes blinked. The left path has been walked recently. Many feet. Heavy ones. The right path is undisturbed. How can you tell? Brackton asked. Even I cannot see that in this dark. Auri was quiet for a moment. Then the shifting skin did something new. It pulsed very faintly, and for a moment the walls of the corridor around them were illuminated in a soft, cool light. Just enough to see. And in that brief illumination, they could all see what Uri saw. Footprints on the left path, dust disturbed, rock worn smooth. The right path was untouched. Yuri could produce light. Not much, not for long, but enough. They took the right path. It led them to the objective 20 minutes ahead of schedule. After the exercise, Maya sat next to Ari in the corridor. She did not say anything for a while. She had learned that Uri responded better to silence than to questions. You did not tell anyone you could do that, Maya said eventually. Nobody asked, Uri said. Does your species all do that? I am different. Maya waited. Uri's skin shifted, going almost fully translucent for a moment before solidifying again. My kind are shaped constant. They do not shift. I do. It is considered a flaw. A flaw, Maya repeated. I was sent here because my family did not know what else to do with me. Maya looked at Uri, at the large dark eyes and the shifting skin and the quiet, gentle presence that hid something extraordinary. You know what I have figured out about this place? Maya said. Every single one of us is here because someone somewhere decided we did not fit. Paperwork error. Wrong species. Too young. Too broken. Too different. The galaxy looked at each of us and said, you do not belong. And here we are. Still here. Still going. Ori's skin pulsed faintly. A warm color this time. Almost golden. I think not fitting is our thing, Maya said. I think it might be our best thing. The 6th week brought the first intergroup exercise, and this was where the story of Group 7 went from interesting to impossible. The exercise was called the Gauntlet. Each training group was placed in a simulated combat environment and tasked with achieving an objective while opposing groups tried to stop them. It was a massive multi-group event involving all the cadets in the intake. The objectives were complex, the environment was dynamic, and the scoring was based on a combination of speed, efficiency, casualties, and tactical creativity. Group 7 was expected to be eliminated in the first round. Every prediction model, every evaluator's assessment, every other group's pre-exercise analysis put Group 7 at the bottom. They were the weakest group. They would be the first to fall. Maya gathered her group before the exercise. They sat in a circle in Training Block C. The stone floor was cold. The lights were dim. It felt like their place. "Here is the thing," Maya said. "Everyone out there is going to ignore us. They think we are nothing. They think we will fold the moment they look at us. That is the best advantage we could possibly have." "Being underestimated is not an advantage," Brackton said. "It is an insult." "It is both," Maya said. "And we are going to use the advantage part and ignore the insult part." It was not a military plan. It was not based on any doctrine any of them had studied. It was based on what she knew about each of them, their strengths, their weaknesses, their quirks, their instincts. Kess would be their forward intelligence, using those incredible ears to track the movements of every other group in the area. Yuri would be their scout, using the shifting skin to become nearly invisible in low-light conditions and the heat vision to spot enemies before they were seen. Drin would handle the technical elements of the objective, which involved bypassing a series of security locks. Brackton and Varric would be the group's shield, positioned to absorb any direct confrontation. Liss would be their rapid response, using the Selene speed to handle any unexpected threats. And Maya would be in the middle with her ricochet discs ready to hit targets that nobody expected to be hit from directions nobody expected them to come from. "We do not fight unless we have to," Maya said. "We do not try to beat anyone. We just complete the objective. Fast, quiet, together. Let the big groups fight each other. We slip through while they are distracted." It was not a warrior's plan. It was a survivor's plan. And for Group 7, it was perfect. The gauntlet began. The simulated environment was a sprawling urban landscape, buildings and streets and alleys and open plazas, all rendered in hard light holographic technology that made it feel completely real. The objective for each group was to reach a central tower and activate a control node. The first group to do so would win. The elite groups moved with military precision. Group 1, Torith's group, pushed straight toward the objective with overwhelming force, smashing through any opposition. Group 2, the Selene Speed team, raced ahead using parkour and agility to outpace the competition. Group 3, the Vorok Heavy Squad, advanced slowly and methodically, building defensive positions as they went. Group 7 went sideways. While every other group took the obvious routes towards the central tower, Maya led her group through the edges of the map, through back alleys and maintenance tunnels and routes that no serious military unit would take because they were too narrow, too indirect, too undignified. Kess's ears guided them around enemy positions. Uri's shifting skin and heat vision identified threats before they materialized. They moved like ghosts through the margins of the battlefield. They encountered Group 4 in a narrow corridor, a mixed species group with strong combat scores. The encounter was sudden and unavoidable. The leader of Group 4, a Talisi with natural venom glands and a reputation for aggressive tactics, saw Group 7 and almost laughed. "The leftovers," the Talisi said. "Surrender now and we will go easy on you." She had 3 ricochet discs in her hand. She threw all 3 in rapid succession. The first bounced off the wall to the left. The second bounced off the ceiling. The third bounced off the floor. All 3 converged on the Talisi from 3 different angles simultaneously. The simulation registered 3 hits. The Talisi was flagged as neutralized before understanding what happened. The rest of Group 4 hesitated. In that moment of hesitation, Liss moved. The Selene was fast, even with the crooked arm, and Liss disabled 2 more opponents before they could react. Brackton charged from the side, using his growing bulk to pin a 4th against the wall. Varric stepped forward and simply absorbed the attack from the 5th, letting the blows bounce off the dense Thosian body before Kess, who had circled behind, tagged the attacker from the rear. Group 4 was eliminated in under 30 seconds. Group 7 moved on. They did not celebrate. They did not gloat. They slipped back into the shadows and kept going. They reached the central tower while Groups 1 and 2 were locked in a massive battle in the main plaza. The sounds of combat echoed through the simulated streets. Energy weapons flashed. Walls crumbled. It was loud and dramatic, and exactly the kind of spectacle that everyone was watching. Nobody was watching the back entrance of the tower. Nobody except Drin, who had already analyzed the lock mechanism and was working on bypassing it with the quiet efficiency of a born engineer. The lock opened. Group 7 entered the tower. They climbed the stairs. They reached the control node. Maya placed her hand on the activation panel. The simulation registered it. A tone sounded across the entire battlefield. The gauntlet was over. Group 7 had won. The silence that followed was different from the silence after Maya's cafeteria question on the first day. That silence had been confusion. This silence was shock. Deep, fundamental, reality, rearranging shock. The leftover group, the misfits, the weakest cadets in the academy. They had not just completed the gauntlet, they had won it. They had beaten every elite group in the intake by avoiding the fight entirely and walking through the gaps that strength and speed and firepower had left unguarded. Commandant Solvrek reviewed the exercise results from his office. He watched the tactical replay. He saw Group 7's route. He saw the way they moved, the way they communicated, the way they covered each other. He saw the human in the middle of it all. The small, soft creature with the ricochet discs and the steady voice. He pulled up her file, Maya Chen. Human. Enrolled through the Frontier Integration Program. He read the enrollment details. He read them again. Then he pulled up the Frontier Integration Program itself. It took him several minutes to find it in the system. It had been created decades ago as a diplomatic gesture and had never been used. It was a dead program, a bureaucratic ghost. Solvrek sat very still. He was beginning to understand something. The human had not been selected. She had not been chosen. She had not earned her place through the traditional channels. She was here because of a clerical error, a mistake, a glitch in the machine. And she was winning. He closed the file and opened a communications channel. He needed to speak with the Galactic Administrative Processing Center on Station Velum 9. He needed to speak with a Drenai clerk named Vikith. And he needed to understand how the most chaotic, least qualified, most absurdly unprepared cadet in the history of the Vorthane Military Excellence Academy was outperforming warriors who had trained for this their entire lives. The answer, Solvrek suspected, would not be in any file. The days after the gauntlet were strange for Group 7. They had won, but winning at the Vorthane Academy did not bring the kind of celebration it might have brought elsewhere. There were no trophies, no applause. No congratulations from the other groups. What there was instead was attention. And at the academy, attention could be as dangerous as any weapon. The elite groups were not happy. Group 1 in particular, Torath's group, had been expected to dominate the gauntlet. They had the strongest cadets, the highest training scores, the most aggressive tactics. They had fought brilliantly, and they had lost to a collection of misfits who had walked around the fight entirely. For a culture built on direct confrontation, this was not just a defeat. It was an embarrassment. Maya felt the shift immediately. In the cafeteria, the casual indifference that other cadets had shown toward Group 7 was replaced by something colder, glances that lingered too long, conversations that stopped when she approached, a tension in the air that had not been there before. She was eating dinner with her group when Drin leaned across the table and spoke in a low voice. "The Kravathi from Group 1 have been talking about us." Kess heard them. Kess's ears rotated slightly in confirmation. "They are angry. They believe our victory was dishonorable. That we avoided combat instead of engaging." "We completed the objective," Bracken said, his scales bristling. "That was the exercise." "The exercise measured completion," Liz said. "Kravathi culture measures how you complete it. To them, winning without fighting is the same as cheating." Maya looked across the cafeteria at the Group 1 table. Torath sat at the center, massive and still, eating in silence. The other Kravathi around Torath were animated, gesturing, their body language radiating frustration. But Torath was calm. Torath was watching. Their eyes met across the room. Maya expected hostility. She expected the cold fury she saw in the other Kravathi. Instead, she saw something she did not expect. She saw curiosity. Torath looked at her the way a predator looks at something it cannot classify, not prey. not threat, something else. Something that did not fit into the categories, and Torith wanted to understand why. Maya looked away first. She was not afraid of Torith. Not exactly, but she was aware that being on the radar of the most dangerous cadet in the academy was not a comfortable position to be in. The 7th week brought individual combat evaluations, and this was where the academy expected Group 7's luck to run out. Team exercises were one thing. Individual performance was another. In one-on-one combat, there was nowhere to hide, no group to rely on, no strategy that could substitute for raw fighting ability. The evaluations were structured as a tournament. Each cadet would fight a series of matches against cadets from other groups. Wins were recorded, losses were recorded. Serious injuries were possible. Deaths were rare but not unheard of. Maya drew her first opponent from Group 3, a Vorok named Scrath. Scrath was armored, powerful, and had an exoskeleton that could shrug off most impacts. Maya had her ricochet discs and approximately 0 chance of winning a direct confrontation. The match took place in a circular arena. Stone floor, stone walls, no cover, no obstacles. It was designed for direct combat. It was the worst possible environment for someone who relied on angles and redirection. Maya stood in the arena and looked at Scrath. Scrath looked at Maya. The insectoid being made a clicking sound that the translator rendered as, "This will be quick." The signal to begin sounded. Scrath charged. The Vorok were not fast, but they were relentless. Scrath came forward like a tank, exoskeleton plates locked, multiple limbs driving against the stone floor. The impact of those legs on the ground sent vibrations Maya could feel through her boots. Maya did not try to block. She did not try to stand her ground. She moved. She sidestepped. She circled. She used every centimeter of the arena to stay out of Scrath's reach, and she threw her discs. The discs bounced off Scrath's exoskeleton with dull thumps. They did no damage. Scrath barely noticed them. The Vorok kept coming, adjusting angle, cutting off escape routes. Maya was running out of space. But she was not running out of ideas. She had been watching Scrath. She had been watching all the Vorok for weeks. She had noted something in her observations. The Vorok exoskeleton had joints. Every suit of armor has joints. The places where the plates connected, where the limbs bent, where the head met the body. These joints were not armored. They were flexible, which meant they were vulnerable. Maya threw a disc at the wall behind Scrath. It bounced off, curved, and hit the joint at the back of Scrath's right rear leg, not hard, but precisely, right in the gap between the plates. Scrath stumbled. Just barely. Just enough. Maya threw again. Wall bounce, floor bounce, and the disc kissed the joint behind Scrath's left front limb. Another stumble. Scrath's clicking became faster, more agitated. The Vorok was not hurt, but the Vorok was confused. Hits were coming from directions that should not be possible in an empty arena. Maya threw 4 more discs in rapid succession. Each one found a different joint. Each one was a glancing blow, barely worth noticing on its own. But together they disrupted Scrath's rhythm. The powerful charge became uncoordinated. The relentless advance became hesitant. And in that moment of hesitation, Maya did something reckless. She charged, straight at Scrath, the smallest being in the arena running directly at the most armored. Scrath braced for impact, expecting some kind of desperate attack. Maya dropped to the ground and slid under Scrath, between the legs, under the belly, where the exoskeleton was thinnest. She slapped a training marker on the ventral plate as she passed, which was the equivalent of a lethal strike in the simulation. The match horn sounded. The evaluators confirmed the hit. Maya had won. She lay on her back on the other side of the arena, breathing hard, her clothes covered in dust from the floor, and she started laughing. Not because it was funny, but because she had just beaten an armored insect warrior by sliding under it like a baseball player stealing home base, and the absurdity of her entire existence at this academy hit her all at once. Scrath stood very still for a long moment. Then the Vorok made a sound that the translator rendered as unprecedented. It was not anger. It was not shame. It was the Vorok expression for something so unexpected that the existing categories of experience had to be expanded to accommodate it. Maya won her first 3 matches. She lost the 4th, against a Salini from Group 2, who was simply too fast for her techniques to work. She lost the 5th against a Trevethy with sensory abilities that allowed it to track her discs mid-flight. She won the 6th by convincing her opponent, a Yanari who was even more nervous than Kess, that she had poisoned her discs. She had not. But the Inari did not know that. Her final record was 4 wins and 2 losses. It was not the best record in the intake. It was not close to the best. But for a human with no natural weapons, no combat training, and a set of practice-throwing discs, it was extraordinary. And it made people nervous. The powerful cadets, the ones who had been bred and trained and engineered for war, could understand another powerful opponent. They could respect strength. They could strategize against speed. They could prepare for armor and venom and claws. They did not know how to prepare for a small, soft creature who might slide under you, or throw a disc off 3 walls to hit your weakest spot, or simply talk you into believing something that was not true. They did not know how to prepare for someone who fought without rules because she had never learned any rules to follow. Commandant Solvrek received the individual evaluation results in his office. He also received a communication from Station Velum 9. The Drenai Administrative Center had investigated the enrollment of Maya Chen. They had found the error, the nutrient paste on the terminal, the phantom inputs, the scrambled codes. It was all documented, all explained, all neatly filed in the Drenai way. They offered their apologies. They offered to issue a corrected visa and arrange immediate transport for the human back to the trade corridor. They would process the withdrawal paperwork within the hour. Solvrek read the communication. Then he read Maya's evaluation reports. Then he read Grell's notes about Group 7. Then he sat in his dark stone office and thought about something he had not thought about in a very long time. The Vorthane Academy had been founded 400 years ago to produce warriors. The best warriors, the most lethal, most capable, most dangerous beings in the galaxy. And for 400 years they had done exactly that. They had produced fighters who could destroy armies, tacticians who could conquer planets, soldiers who could survive anything the universe threw at them. But the universe was changing. The threats facing the galaxy were not the same threats that existed 400 years ago. Wars between species were less common. The challenges now were more complex. Interspecies cooperation, resource management, diplomacy across cultural barriers that no amount of military force could break through. The galaxy needed warriors, yes, but it also needed something else. Something the Academy had never been designed to produce. It needed people who could bring others together. People who could look at a group of broken, misfit, outcast beings and see not their weaknesses, but their potential. People who could turn a collection of leftovers into a team that outperformed the elite. Solvrek replied to the Drenai communication. His message was brief. The enrollment stands. The cadet stays. There is no error. He sent it before he could change his mind. The 8th week brought the event that would define the rest of Maya's time at the Academy. It was not an exercise. It was not a test. It was a crisis. And it was real. A structural failure in the lower levels of the asteroid caused a collapse in Training Block F, which was located 3 levels below Group 7's Training Block C. At the time of the collapse, 15 cadets and 2 instructors were conducting an exercise in Block F. The collapse sealed the exits. The cadets were trapped under tons of rock with limited air and no communication with the surface. The Academy's response was immediate and efficient. Engineering teams were dispatched to assess the collapse. Heavy equipment was mobilized. A rescue plan was developed. The estimated time to reach the trapped cadets was 14 hours. The air in the sealed section would last approximately 8. This was announced to the Academy at large during an emergency assembly. Solvrek delivered the information with his usual precision. Rescue operations were underway. All cadets were to remain in their quarters. The situation was under control. Maya did not go to her quarters. She went to Training Block C and found her group already there. They had all heard the same thing she had. 14 hours to dig through. 8 hours of air. The math did not work. There has to be another way in, Maya said. The asteroid is full of natural tunnels. The cooperation exercise proved that. There are paths through this rock that the official maps do not show. Even if there are, Drin said, they could be collapsed too, or too narrow, or flooded. Or they could be clear, Maya said. We do not know until we look. The Commandant said to stay in quarters, Brachthan said. The Commandant also said the rescue will take 14 hours. Those people have 8. 7 beings in a cold stone room, looking at each other, looking at Maya. We did this before, Maya said softly. The cooperation exercise, dark tunnels, unknown hazards. We did it together, and we did it intact. This is the same thing, except this time there are people at the other end who need us to get there. Kess's ears rotated forward. I know the layout of this section. There is a maintenance shaft that connects blocks C and F. It runs through the natural rock. It was sealed years ago because it was considered unstable, but it may not be blocked by the same collapse. Can you find it? Maya asked. I can hear the air moving through it from here, Kess said. If air is moving, it is not fully blocked. They moved. No orders. No authorization. No permission. Whoa. 7 misfits in the bowels of an asteroid, moving through corridors they were not supposed to be in, heading toward a section they were not supposed to enter. Cass found the maintenance shaft behind a sealed panel in the lower section of Block C. Brackton ripped the panel off the wall with all 4 arms. Behind it was a rough-hewn tunnel, narrower than the main corridors, with air moving through it in a slow, steady current. They entered the shaft. Uri went first, those large, dark eyes seeing what others could not, the shifting skin pulsing with faint light to illuminate the path. Kess followed, ears tracking every sound in the rock around them. Then Drin, reading the structural integrity of the tunnel walls with the analytical eye of an engineer. Then Maya, in the middle as always. Then Varric, solid and steady. Then Liss, watching the rear. And Brackton, filling the tunnel behind them with his growing bulk. The shaft was not stable. They could feel the rock shifting around them. Dust fell from the ceiling in thin streams. The walls creaked and groaned with the settling weight of the collapse that had happened nearby. This section could go at any time, Drin said. The Pelori's gills were fluttering rapidly, a sign of stress. Then we move fast, Maya said. They did not move fast. They moved carefully. Speed in an unstable tunnel would create vibrations. So they moved with agonizing precision, each step placed deliberately, each breath controlled. Maya's heart was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat, but her voice stayed steady, and she kept talking. Not about anything important. Just talking, because that was what she did. That was what held them together. They reached a section where the tunnel had partially collapsed. A wall of rubble blocked the path. Not completely. There was a gap at the top, barely wide enough for a body to squeeze through. I can fit, Uri said. Uri, who was the smallest of them, whose body could shift and compress in ways that solid species could not. It is not safe, Maya said. Nothing here is safe, Uri said. And for the first time there was something in Uri's voice that was not quiet or hesitant. It was determined. Uri squeezed through the gap. There was a long, terrible moment of silence. Then Uri's voice came from the other side. Soft but clear, it opens up beyond this. I can see the Block F corridor. There is debris, but the path is passable. They widened the gap. Brackton used his forearms to carefully shift the rubble. Varric braced the ceiling above them, taking the weight on those dense Thosian shoulders. One by one, they squeezed through. On the other side, they found the trapped cadets. 15 cadets and 2 instructors huddled in a sealed section of Block F. Some were injured, some were unconscious. The air was thin and getting thinner. The 2 instructors, both Drathari, had maintained discipline, keeping the cadets calm, rationing movement to conserve oxygen. But the fear in the room was thick enough to taste. When Group 7 emerged from the tunnel, the trapped cadets stared at them as if they were hallucinations. Who sent you? One of the instructors asked. Nobody, Maya said. We sent ourselves. They worked quickly. Drin assessed the injured and provided first aid with supplies from a kit Brackton had thought to grab on the way out of Block C. Kess guided the mobile cadets into the maintenance shaft, using those incredible ears to navigate the safest path back. Varric carried those who could not walk. Liss moved between the groups, fast and watchful, making sure no one was left behind. Uri lit the way through the dark tunnel with that soft, warm glow, and Maya stood at the gap in the rubble, counting heads, making sure every single person went through before she followed. The last one through was the injured Drathari instructor, who was heavy and semi-conscious and had to be dragged through the gap by Brackton and Varric together. As they pulled the instructor through, the tunnel behind them groaned. Dust fell. Rocks shifted. Move, Drin said. Now. Not carefully this time. Fast. The tunnel was collapsing behind them, the rock giving way in a slow cascade that followed them like a wave. Maya ran, her lungs burning in the thin air, her legs screaming from fatigue, and all she could think was, "Do not stop! Do not stop! Do not stop!" They burst out of the maintenance shaft into Training Block C just as the tunnel behind them collapsed completely. The sound was enormous, a deep, grinding roar that shook the floor and filled the corridor with dust. They lay on the ground, coughing, gasping, covered in rock dust, and alive. All of them. Every single one. 17 lives saved. Not by the Academy's elite, not by the engineering teams with their heavy equipment and 14-hour estimates, by 7 misfits who crawled through an unstable tunnel because the math said there was not enough time, and they refused to accept that math. The aftermath was complicated. Officially, Group 7 had violated direct orders by leaving their quarters during an emergency. They had entered restricted sections of the asteroid without authorization. They had taken actions that endangered themselves and others. Unofficially, they had saved 17 lives 6 hours before the official rescue would have reached them. Solvrek stood in his office and looked at the report. He looked at it for a long time. Then he signed an order that had never been signed in the Academy's 400-year history. Group 7 was promoted. Not to an elite training group, to a new category entirely, one that Solvrek created himself. He called it the Integrators. The role of the Integrators was not to be the strongest fighters. It was not to be the fastest or the toughest or the most lethal. It was to be the bridge, the connective tissue between species, between groups, between the old way of doing things and whatever came next. It was a recognition that the galaxy needed something the Academy had never thought to teach. The ability to see others clearly and bring out the best in them. The ceremony was small, not a grand affair. Group 7 stood in Training Block C, their home, their stone room at the bottom of the Academy. Solvrek stood before them. Grell stood behind Solvrek, and for the first time since Maya had met him, Grell did not look tired. The Vorthane Academy was built on the principle that the universe does not forgive weakness, Solvrek said. For 400 years we have trained cadets to be strong enough to survive that truth. His molten eyes moved across each of them. Kess with the rotating ears, Brakthan with his hardening scales, Drin with the engineer's mind, Varric with the unbreakable body, Liss with the adapted fighting style, Uri with the impossible light, and Maya, small, soft, smiling. "You have shown me that there is another truth," Solvrek said. "The universe does not forgive weakness, but it has a strange respect for those who find strength in each other." He placed the new designation on each of their files. Integrator class. First of their kind. Maya stepped forward. For once, she did not have a joke. She did not have a clever comment or a question about the cafeteria. She had something else. Something that had been building in her chest since the first day, since the granola bar on the transport, since the stone bed and the dark tunnels and the discs that bounced off walls and the voice that held people together in the dark. "Thank you," she said, "for not sending me home." Solvrek looked at her. "You were never supposed to be here, Maya Chen. I know, but I am beginning to think that the things that are not supposed to happen are sometimes the things that need to happen most." Maya smiled. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a ration bar. She broke it into 7 pieces and handed one to each member of her group. They ate them together, standing in their cold stone room at the bottom of the most dangerous academy in the galaxy. It was not a grand moment. There was no music, no applause, no dramatic lighting, just 7 misfits eating a bad ration bar and knowing, with a quiet certainty that needed no words, that they had become something the galaxy had never seen before. And far away on Station Velum 9, a Drenai clerk named Viketh was processing forms and had no idea that a smear of nutrient paste had accidentally changed the course of galactic history. Some mistakes, it turns out, are the best things that ever happen. And some people, the ones who were never supposed to be there, end up being exactly the ones who were needed all along.